Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another video here in the Sports Daily Media Network YouTube channel. I'm your host, Sean Vowells. I've got Joe Meade with me, and it's the Final Four recap between Michigan and Arizona. Joe, Michigan 91, Arizona 73. What an awesome game for your Wolverines here as they took it to one of the best teams in the country and advanced to the national championship game.
Yeah, and the outcome of this game probably pretty shocking if you just look at the final score, but when you contextualize it with everything,
Yeah, it was worse than the
it,
final score.
yeah, it
Yeah.
was way worse than the final score. So I'm just gonna get into this in chronological order. I think the first narrative of the game is Axel Lendeborg immediately gets in two fouls, like within I think the
Minute.
first 80
Yeah.
seconds of the game. So Sean, aside from a devastating injury, that's probably the worst way you could have drawn up a start to this game for Michigan. So for them to respond the way they did, they started up 10-1, Sean, even with Yaxel out of the game, without him registering a single point up to that stage. And, you kind of figure, all right, Michigan hasn't really started well this whole tournament. It's not shocking that they were going to find their footing early in one of these games and happened to be this one. Then Arizona kind of just went stagnant. At one point it was 26-10. They did, to their credit, cut it to 28-23. They went on a 13-2 run. And that's something we've seen Arizona do a lot throughout this tournament and throughout the season, aside for their 1 week slump of sorts where they had their two regular season losses. You saw they against Purdue down 7 or 9 at the half, and then, they immediately get the lead back the first 5 minutes. But a dunk from Ryan Gale to make it 30-23. And you're thinking, wow, Michigan, they're kind of, you thought Michigan was just going to float. Not only was Yaks in foul trouble, he got injured, rolled up, looked like he went to the locker room. It didn't look good. Morez Johnson, two fouls. Adai Mara, who was having the game of his life up to that point as well, two fouls. So you're thinking, man, like, what really stopped Arizona? I don't think they necessarily hit shots, but I think it was Jaden Bradley picking up three fouls. I think that's going to be the overwhelming storyline that a lot of people are missing. Without him in there, the offense wasn't flowing the same as we've seen all season, and certainly they got some decent shots off. They just weren't hitting them, and without Bradley in their shot, they kind of looked like a fish out of water, to be honest with you.
I think it was a decent game plan for Michigan to try and get some charges on that because, I don't know. They do that a lot. They like, especially the guards between Burries and Bradley, they just barrel into the paint. And if you can get in position, which Cadeau did, like, they're going to call offensive fouls. They were not anywhere close to wrong at all. And then obviously with three fouls, he has to be playing. He doesn't play the rest of the first half, and then he's very very passive early in the second half because it's not like he's had defensive fouls either. He's had to be passive on the offensive end because he knows that the defense is looking for to step in front and to get him another foul. But I thought the way that this game went tempo wise was a little bit faster than I expected. Michigan really tried to get up and down. I think it's something that they've gotten a lot better at here in year two with Dusty May, and especially Adai Mara, Joe. And the Mara discourse is going around. They're like blaming Mick Cronin. What happened last year? He wasn't a good player last year for UCLA.
No.
He would have not been good, especially in that game. He didn't get up and down the floor. He was not really good defensively. He is a completely different player now. He plays a lot of minutes. He's usually in the 30s, and he was running faster than the Arizona big guys to get up and down the floor. So that's how Michigan obviously got the lead. And then I think you just ran them off the floor. Honestly, they weren't used to going up and down like that. They weren't used to chasing the game, so they had to go along with it and play up tempo and increase the amount of possessions. But it just never happened. And like I said to you, Joe, at halftime, like they don't have the offensive firepower to turn this thing around quickly. It would have to take a drought from Michigan to give them enough time to come back and you know Michigan were able to hold serve offensively. The offense has been a huge success here in the tournament for Michigan. They've had some games where they haven't defended all that well, but it hasn't mattered because they've scored 90 plus in each game now. But I did not see this game going this way, and I think a lot of people didn't. I thought it would be really close. I thought it would be close to a coin toss, but Michigan was the better team by far.
And not only that shot, I was extremely worried at halftime, up 48-32, which
Yeah.
in hindsight sounds ludicrous. Without Yaxel Lendeborg, I'm thinking, man, logic tells you Arizona's going to cut into it. Now, Sean said, it's going to take a lot for them to necessarily like flip the script around totally. But I think most people at halftime figured, yeah, like Arizona's going to cut this to single digits at some point, make a decent run at it, put some fear into Michigan.
And the
It
the
was the
beginning of
exact
that second
opposite.
half run was the same as the first half, really. It was like, okay, so this is going to be a blowout, not a close game. 16 is that danger zone, Joe, right? If you lose the first period, you lose the first segment, and it's a 11-point lead, let's say with 15 minutes left, that's a ball game. But it was 23. It got up to 30 at one point. Um, and without, like, Michigan shoots 44% from three. Obviously, they were the one team that did shoot it pretty well from three, and they had a little bit of an unorthodox way of preparing for that. Rolled out the hoop over to the big house and started shooting in a football stadium. As silly as it sounds, Joe, it probably made a difference. Depth perception is a real thing. If you saw in both of the games, corner threes did not go in, and floaters without the backboard didn't go in either. So looks like Michigan had a little bit of a fancy way of dealing with the depth perception, but pretty safe to say it worked.
Safe to say it worked at Michigan. Timely shooting is what I'd say. Trey McKinney, 4 of 6 from three. I think he had the game of his life. Yaxel Lendeborg, in his limited 14 minutes shot, he's 3 of 3 from three. If you're going to have your star guy play like a 38-year-old at the YMCA per Dusty May, going 3 of 3 from the 3-point line is a big help.
I
And,
believe all of
you
those
know,
were in the second half too, Joe, if I'm not mistaken.
one was in first
One was
half, but
first
yeah,
half.
two second half, but they were timely.
Yeah.
Arizona would get a basket, and what's amazing shot is Michigan traded Arizona in the second half, and frankly, there'd be times Michigan over traded them. They were up 30 at one point, and really, I think they took their foot off the gas in the last 6 minutes. Arizona
Yeah,
kind
they
of cut
definitely
into
did.
that, made it, kind of a respectable 18-point deficit more so than 30. But the bottom line is Tommy Lloyd said it too. They just got their ass kicked. I don't think they'd ever. I think their largest deficit of the year, they said on the Fab
Yeah, it was
Five cast,
11.
Sean, was 11, and
Yeah.
then that was nearly tripled in this game. So I still think a great year from Arizona and Tommy Lloyd, and I should have said something in our other video about Illinois. I think two phenomenal seasons for those teams. It's been a long time coming for them. Arizona hangs two banners, or three banners, I should say, two in the pre-tournament and then one for the Final Four. But I kind of just ran into a buzzsaw here, and frankly, Sean, I think what a shame is this probably could have been the title game in most years. So Arizona probably could have. I think they're good enough to be a second, like not even as an insult. They're good enough to have gotten to the title game, is my point.
Well, yeah, and that's why we like the order of the number one seeds. We said for a while really sort of mattered more than maybe most years because Duke was number one overall. If one of these teams was number one overall, then they would have been on other sides of the bracket. But yeah, it was quick, Joe. That bracket largest deficit of the season that came up quick on the TV, and I know you didn't watch it on TV, but we're like, whoa, we're 6 minutes into this game, and they're somewhere that they've never been this year on the biggest stage. I know they have some experience, but they have a lot of freshmen too. So they just weren't really able to get going, and then by the time they did, they were too far behind. But Elliot Cadeau, I thought played a really excellent game, and if you look at his stats, 5 of 17 from the field, 6 turnovers, you might be like, well, that's what are you talking about? That's not good. I thought he did a lot of things that impacted winning. He 10 assists and 5 rebounds. You can live with 6 turnovers if he gives you 10 assists. And a lot of those were just throwing it up to Mara, who found a way to get it in. But I thought Elliot Cadeau really, really played well in a spot that we thought maybe he might not.
Yeah, and you're right, Sean. The stats I think were very deceptive. Normally this season's stats told the full story with Ellie Cadeau at times. There'd be some games like the Duke game he really struggled, couldn't hit anything. And what's crazy, Sean, is as well as he played, he started off really poorly. He started off 1 of 6, taking a lot of crappy 2-point contested jumpers with plenty of time in the shot clock. Threw a few passes out of bounds, but I think one of his better games, and with Yaxel Lendeberg out, I think him and Adai Mara stepped up in a major way. And frankly, Sean, Michigan kind of hockey shifted this game. They kept rotating the lineup, right? It kind of looked like certainly they didn't game plan for a Yaxel injury.
I thought there were a lot of lineups out there for Michigan that we haven't seen much of this year, and I think it threw Arizona off a little bit too.
Yeah, and frankly, Sean, it's those lineups, and your coach look a lot smarter when you're shooting above 40% from three, which Michigan was. And I still think they could have gotten better games from Damari Burnett, who only really had 5 effective points aside from garbage time. Will Cheddar, didn't get way too many quality looks, and you know Michigan also missed their fair share of open good looks as well. So I think there's a lot they could clean up too for Monday night. Certainly, we'll preview more of that game in another video. But Sean, hard to say this wasn't one of the more impressive Final Four round performances against that high caliber team. From start to finish.
Yeah, it does bring a couple of games to mind, Joe, going back, like highly coveted, hyped up Final Four games between two great teams, and then one team blows out the other, like what Villanova did to Oklahoma when they hit like a billion threes. And there's been some other ones that come to mind too, or that don't come to mind, but there's been some other ones. And yeah, like you have Yaxel playing 14 minutes, nine of which he was severely compromised. You have um, Mara and Johnson both getting 2 fouls in the first half. You played a few minutes with Will Cheddar at the five against Arizona, and you crushed them. You won by 18, and the score was friendly to Arizona. Like, this was an unbelievable game. Watching this back, I think is going to be pretty cool one day. When it's on in the middle of the summer, 3 years from now, it'd be like, wow, forgot how awesome of a game this was from Michigan. Um, but yeah, I think a number of different lineups out there. There was some Roddy Gale at the 4 minutes too, and I think it actually benefited Michigan to have a little bit more speed out there because, like I said, they got up and down the floor. They were able to spread the floor with their 3 point ball, and like we said, Joe, we went back to it. Teams that are built to beat Michigan have to be really small, shoot the three well, and really fast on offense, and they have to be really big and guard at the rim on defense. And it's impossible to be both. So Arizona, obviously, probably the most alike to Michigan of any team. The two 7-footers. I thought both of them did all right, to be honest. Koa Pete, 16 and 11, did miss a lot of shots. Krivas, 11 and 6 in 28 minutes. I thought the tempo was a little bit too fast for him. But I just think Arizona was a deer in headlights, and by the time they got their rhythm, they were too far behind.
Yeah, and I think Braden Burries has been phenomenal all year. Certainly should be a lottery pick, but tonight it
Yep.
was one of his more forgettable games. And Jaden Bradley, I really think if he plays this game's not necessarily different result wise, but
Yeah, he won't play
probably
this bad again. Yeah.
he won't play that bad again. And more importantly, Sean, he doesn't foul out that quickly necessarily, or effectively foul out, like 3 fouls in the first half. I thought Tommy Lloyd and Dusty May, maybe Tommy Lloyd's just the unlucky one who drew the short straw because Michigan played Yaks with 2 fouls, Mara with 2 fouls, and Perez with 2 fouls in the half. And luckily for Michigan, none of those guys picked up a third.
And that, like, I don't even know if this was like a true X's and O's like masterclass. I think it was obviously really good from Dusty, but in the other game, I thought UConn really was better X's and O's wise than Illinois. I don't know if that's really the case here. I think Michigan just executed a lot better, and clearly, an 18-point win could have been more. I think Michigan, when they're executing like this, are not going to get beaten. Now, will you execute like this against UConn? That's the question that we'll answer in the next video. But Joe, unless you got anything else to add, I think we'll wrap it up here.
Sounds good to me, Sean.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.